I was able to observe you and Jonathan in your writing lesson. And I want you to, as we are moving into almost our last week of instruction, and you've been tutoring him for some time now, can you share a little bit about your lesson, and not just about your lesson, but what are some changes and trends you've seen in Jonathan's writing as you've been supporting him?
So our writing his writing has been, it's been a bit of a difficult assignment or activities for him. He actually gets fatigued pretty easily. So we tried typing once, but in terms of the objective that I wanted him to achieve, it didn't really equate to, it wasn't really a necessary addition. So I've been trying to have him orally kind of articulate his thoughts to me instead.
So you're saying, so what I'm hearing you saying is, when you've tried writing lessons beforehand, they haven't been successful in the sense that he gets easily tired and maybe not as engaged.
I think the volume of it, I had to back it down a little bit, so I had to learn quickly what was appropriate for him in terms of the amount of writing that we did. So for this particular lesson, I really tried to break it down and scaffold it in a way that made sense to him. So the previous lesson, we used a word web and we did a lot of brainstorming to create a narrative, ideas for a narrative story, which is what we're going to write. And what I did with this particular lesson that you observed was I took components of what he wrote down and I made some manipulatives with them so that he didn't have to rewrite everything, and all we were doing was organizing his thoughts. So there was still the writing process going on in our brains, how we're organizing things between our setting, our character, and our problem. But the actual physical writing was not really present for him. So I think that helped him in terms of organizing his thoughts, and also seeing that writing isn't always just physically writing. It's just thinking about what we want to write and how we want to write it.
So it seems like you're being flexible, and you caught on quickly to the trend that you can't just put a piece of paper in front of him and ask him to write. He's going to get fatigued easily, and he needs more scaffolding in the actual writing process. So it seems like those trends led you to the act of story mapping, and then the lesson I observed with organizing your thoughts. So based on your lesson and based on the work you've been doing with Jonathan, can you think of a theorist we've been learning about that you can connect to, maybe their models as you've been planning your lessons? You could talk specifically to this lesson or to other lessons as well.
Well, in general, the funds of knowledge have been in the back of my head for most of the lessons, and I know no one did like a report on it, but I know that was Mole and Gonzalez. That was one of the first things that we talked about here. So that's definitely been a focus, I think, for all of us. So that concept of considering the student's background has always been kind of gearing what I'm giving him to read, and also what we read and write about. But in addition to the funds of knowledge, the sociocultural theory that many of our theorists kind of talk about, including Catherine Au and Sonia Nieto, which specifically speaks to the importance of incorporating a student's culture into their literacy, into their learning. So for my particular student, the consideration of his background, which is from a low-ish middle-class background. He's African American. He's very family-oriented, very family-centric home life. He sees his cousins almost every day. So those are the small things that I maybe wouldn't have considered in a prior life, I guess. But now understanding the impact of their specific elements to their home life, and how that affects how his lens through what he reads. So the book that we read most recently also focused on a very small but very family-centric storyline, and I think at first maybe he wasn't used to reading something like that, so his responses were not necessarily geared in what he read, but I think we're geared in how he's answered questions before in school. So because I wasn't sure what type of books he's been exposed to in school, I did try to give him more of a different viewpoint of a family. So this particular family was black. The grandma was the head of the house. He lived with his grandma also, with his sister and mom and dad. And the little boy was also, it was a boy, so I thought that was just something that he would be interested in. And he loves basketball, and the little boy in this story wanted basketball shoes that were really popular, so those were all of the things that I kind of gathered up, again, to feed just what we read, and in addition to how we talked about it.
So it sounds like you're pulling from different theorists and the funds of knowledge when you're making those conscious choices. When observing your lesson, he, from some of your comments about the story, I remember some of those connections to his ideas on the chart you created as he was organizing his story. So can you talk to more about like those theories of cultural responsiveness and what that might have looked like in your writing lesson?
So in the writing lesson, in the brainstorming session, we had to really think hard about all of the things that we kind of see every single day. So when we talked about setting, I didn't just want him to say a shopping mall. I wanted him to name a specific place he goes to that he's familiar with where he shops. So we talked about Walmart, and then we talked about, well, who do you go to Walmart with? Who do you go shopping with? What do you shop for? So all of those different answers, again, kind of are fed from what he's used to doing and where he's used to going all of the time. So this very general story of going shopping can be very different for the student that's maybe being tutored next door to me. So I wanted him to really hone in on his own details of his life to kind of color the story as we started to write and come up with a setting and come up with a problem that was specific to him and his life. So for instance, he loves playing games with his cousins. So we talked about the types of games and how do you play the game? What do you need to play the games? To again, kind of have him understand that what he experiences is important to make a story about. So that kind of helped him and motivated him to want to write more.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that you're not only connecting to the theorists but the funds of knowledge, and you made this this organization of ideas purposeful to his own life in order to keep him engaged, instead of just giving him a writing task that was just kind of about anything. So as you think about the data that was collected, can you reflect on if you feel like from looking at the data, do you feel like you met your objective, and so your objective was to have him to be able to create this understanding of character, setting, and theme in order to organize?
I think that by using, I used color-coded kind of tabs to help him organize the character, setting, and problem, and the theme. And I think by him seeing it visually in front of him in different columns on the chart really helped him differentiate between what a character looks like, what it sounds like versus a setting. We also discussed briefly how sometimes a setting can also be a problem, or it can be part of a theme, or a character can be a problem if it's a character versus another character. So he was really starting to see the breakdown of the different story elements, which we've listed off before, but now we're kind of adding the visual to it by using the chart and by using the colors. And again, by him using his own ideas. It wasn't just kind of a random passage. It was a story that we were authentically creating together. And I think that really helped solidify in his brain in his mind, what the definition and what the meaning of these certain elements were, since that's what we were focusing on for that day.
So it sounds like by looking at the data and reflecting on different meaningful parts of the lesson, that he was able to identify these parts of a story independently. And he seemed engaged as well, so.
Yes, he always